Thank you for that. If I could ask all the panelists to come up. While everyone's getting settled, I'll just reassure everyone that although I'm going to start the questions, I'm going to only ask like 2 or 3 so that you will have a chance to ask questions as well. The first question I'd like to ask is about when does the presentation, well, I guess I would start with you, Zoe. When do you think about the final presentation of your work? What part of the concept does that come in? And I understand because you have shall we say, non-traditional format, that it might be different for a number of artists, but in your case, when do you think about it?
Well, I actually think for the last project that I had, it was actually, the concept was first and the photographs were second.
Okay.
And so really the photographs were kind of by the wayside, actually, in terms of how I thought about presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So the structure of the installation came, and then my thought about how the photographs would be presented was secondary.
Okay.
So that's how it rolled.
Okay. Foley, well, do artists come to you at sort of all stages of their project, and when do you start helping them?
I mean, it certainly depends on the artist. I mean, some artists start off with a concept in mind, and they have a strong vision, you know, from the inception of the project to the actual installation of the work. You know, certainly there are a few things that we have to deal with. One is the practicality of it. It's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to actually try to execute it, both financially and logistically in the space. But I think for the most part, the artists that I work with, you know, say for Orion, you know, has some idea of how the work needs to be seen. In other words, the work has to have these other elements in order for the work to be fully understood or to reach its kind of full visual potential. But I would say most photographers that I do work with look at me and kind of shrug and, you know, want the help as to how do we, because that's not their, they think about it, but it's not their expertise per se. Right. And that could be even the choice of the color of the frame they're not sure about. You know, face mounting, not face mounting, matte, no matte, size, you know, there's a lot of issues. And I think many photographers actually put the onus on the gallerist, unless again, like they have a full-blown concept of the presentation, and that presentation is integral to kind of fully understanding the work. So it definitely varies.
And Nora, when do you feel that, like in an ideal world, and have you ever seen it happen, that an artist thinks about the conservation and like longevity of their work when they're making it?
It's the same. I mean, it depends on the artist completely. Yeah. Some really do, and some don't at all. And some, you know, will call you 5 years, 10 years down the line when they've seen things happen and say, what do I do now? But I don't know, I kind of, you know, I give advice, but I also really feel that the aesthetics, you know, their work and them doing the work is the most important thing. You know, I'll deal with it later, whatever they've come up with. You know,
so
that's really
have you ever
important.
found yourself wishing, oh, I wish they would have thought about this when they
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And what happens when that occurs? Then say they're not around, then how do you get to what you should do about the fact that it's no longer the object they create?
You have to be creative. You know, you have to. No, it varies dramatically from situation to situation. Sometimes you can make it look the way they wanted it to look, even though, you know, backstage there's some things propping it up and this and that. I mean, you run into that with new media, for example. Some artists would like some artists don't care. You can use whatever screen you want, put it on the wall, it doesn't matter. Some artists have a specific mechanism by which the image should be viewed, but you can sometimes cheat and get it there by a different method. You know, so you have their weird presentation screen, but the way the image is delivered is different. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. Yeah.
Thanks, Nora. And Max, I'm really intrigued by your idea, your sort of concepts of the artist book and the different ways they can be approached, and whether the artist is, or the photographer is thinking about a book when they make it, like William Klein was thinking of a visual diary. But what kinds of sort of special considerations do you get to when it comes to collecting those things? I'm sure you have a personal collection, but you also collect for an institution, and then exhibiting or having library visitors look at them. I mean, what kinds of special issues do you come up with?
Those are 4 questions.
Those are a lot of questions.
Okay, pick any one of them.
Okay. Well, when it comes to the photographic artist book, I mainly deal with artist books. I do deal with photo book works, occasionally photo books, and occasionally the photographic photography book as well. But I'm interested in how the artist is using a photo base in order to be, as I said, be expressive within the book. And is that successful? Is it, is it the use of color, the use of black and white, the use of movement? Movement is really important in books, no matter what kind of photographic bookwork it is. And I look for that, and when I collect for the department, when I collect for the university, I'm always thinking about, my job is to preserve bookworks and then give access to them. Why am I preserving these bookworks? Because they have some sort of need, some sort of usefulness within the university context. So I'm always thinking about, too, I may really love a bookwork, but if it doesn't have, a meaning for usage at the university, I might not be able to acquire it. And, I'm spending your tax dollars, basically, to acquire these materials, so I want to make sure that I'm spending it appropriately. So I like to think that everything I get is exactly what we need. And when it comes to presentation, that's always been a problem. For libraries, the difficulty is how do we give access to materials like this, sometimes these have original photographs of them, not just reproductions of photographs. It's not just ink on paper. Sometimes it's actually the photographic print. How do we give access to these while not removing, or while not putting a barrier between the user and the information that may be present? That information is not just visual, it's how it feels, it's how it sounds, it's what it means to be in the presence of this object. And that is something that you have to have very, very specific kinds of regulations on how to handle things. And we train everybody in how to handle things, and hopefully that will help us. But when you show that image of the curator touching the photograph, and we all cringed when we saw that, how do we avoid that in a special collections environment? That's something I have to deal with all the time, and it's not an easy thing to do. Then when museums have to show artist books, or I have to show artist books in a case, that becomes really problematic, because it's not about the photographic image, it's about your movement through the book that presents the photographic image. And if you show a book in a case like this, it's like showing 5 frames from a 2-hour movie. This is the book, right? This is what it's like. But you may be able to get a sense of the image and the color, and maybe some narrative, but it's like a snapshot in time, and that's always been difficult too, and that remains difficult. I think we were talking about this earlier. Do you create a facsimile? Do you do a video image? If you do a video image of it, then you're no longer tactily involved in the object, and so on.
I think it's really interesting now too, when sort of everybody's making their own book with Lulu, and you can print on demand and all.
Yeah.
So, if you want to save something like that and show it to people, how do you make it accessible? It's, a difficult question. But instead of my talking, I'm going to ask one more question, and then let you ask a question of each other, or questions of each other before I open it to the audience. And that question is, where do you feel the artist's responsibility towards the longevity of their piece begins? Do you think there is a responsibility, the artist has a responsibility toward how long their